The first time Hope Zachary leveled his Winchester at a desperate soul. He wasn't expecting to find a wife. Standing in the pale Wyoming dawn of 1878, he'd caught her red-handed, a wild-eyed woman with torn stockings stealing eggs from his chicken coop, her thin fingers trembling as she clutched her meager prize. Most men would have run her off, or worse. But there was something in those defiant eyes that spoke to the ghosts haunting his own past, a familiar desperation he recognized like an old friend. What he couldn't know then, as he offered this stranger the oddest proposition of her life, was that her secrets carried a deadly weight, a weight measured in blood, powerful enemies, and a child whose safety hung by the fraying thread of her mother's determination. Sometimes salvation and damnation arrive in the same moment, wearing the same face. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories connect people from all around the world. The Wyoming Territory, 1878. Dawn breaks over whispering pines, a secluded settlement nestled between rolling hills and towering pines. Hope Zachary steps onto his porch, Winchester rifle in hand, surveying his modest cattle ranch with the practiced vigilance of a man who's learned that nothing in this life comes easy. The pale sunlight filters through the pine trees surrounding his homestead, casting long shadows across the yard between his cabin and the weathered barn. At 43, Hope's weathered features tell of hard years lived with quiet dignity. The creases around his eyes deepen as he squints against the morning light, planning to check the north fence line before the day's heat sets in. Years of solitude have shaped him into a man of few words, but deliberate action. Each day, a testament to the life he's carved from this unforgiving land after escaping his own troubled past. As he rounds the corner of the henhouse, movement catches his eye. A woman crouches low by the chicken coop, her hands full of freshly gathered eggs. Her wild, desperate eyes meet his, and for a moment, neither moves. "You planning to cook those up somewhere? Or just plain starving?" Hope calls, keeping his voice even despite the rifle in his hand. She freezes like a cornered animal, shoulders tensing as if preparing to bolt. Slowly, she rises to her feet, still clutching the eggs. Her dress is travel-stained and muddy along the hem, her boots cracked along the seams. Though she appears to be in her mid-20s, hardship has etched deeper lines around her eyes. "I ain't here to rob you blind," she says, her voice barely above a whisper, cracked from thirst or fear or both. "Left a rabbit in trade? In my satchel." Hope tilts his head slightly, studying her. "Well, you are holding my eggs." The woman glances down at her hands, then lifts her chin with a defiant dignity that catches him off guard. There's something in her stance, a stubborn pride despite her circumstances, that resonates with him. "You got family?" he asks, noticing how her gaze keeps darting toward the tree line. Her jaw tightens. "A girl, Sarah, 7 years old, left her hiding in a lean-to about a mile west." Hope lets the silence stretch between them, taking her measure. She stands still as a fence post, but he can see the fine tremble in her hands. This isn't a thief by trade, just a mother at the end of her rope. "You got a name?" he finally asks. "Eleanor Rivers," she replies, though something in her eyes suggests this might not be the full truth. "Well, Eleanor," Hope says, setting his rifle against the chicken coop, "I've got a proposition for you." He pauses, gauging her reaction. "I've got a ranch that needs tending, someone to cook, help with the animals. That's honest work with fair pay." He pauses again, the next words surprising even himself. "Or there's another option. Preacher rides through every month or so. If you're looking for something more permanent, I could use a wife." Eleanor returns before noon with a small, solemn-faced girl trailing behind her. Sarah has her mother's dark hair and watchful eyes. But there's something different in her gaze, a haunted quality no child should possess. Hope shows them to the cabin behind the main house, a simple one-room structure he'd built years back when he'd dreamed of having ranch hands someday. "It ain't much," he tells them, "but the roof don't leak, and the stove works fine." Eleanor surveys the room, her shoulders dropping slightly in what might be relief. "Thank you, Mr. Zachary." "Hope," he corrects, "just hope." That first week passes in a cautious dance of boundaries being established. Eleanor proves herself capable in the kitchen, transforming simple ingredients into meals that awaken memories, Hope thought long buried. But he notices her constant vigilance, the way she positions herself between doorways and her daughter, how she startles at sudden sounds, the manner in which she scans the horizon whenever she steps outside. Sarah remains silent for days, watching Hope with solemn eyes as he goes about his chores. On the fifth morning, he finds her sitting on the corral fence, observing as he brushes down his horse. "You got a lot of animals," she says suddenly, her voice small but clear. Hope glances up, surprised by the child's words. "Just enough," he replies. "Each one has a purpose here." Sarah studies him with eyes too old for her years. "Do we have a purpose?" The question catches Hope off guard. Before he can answer, dust rises on the horizon, riders approaching from the east. His hand instinctively moves toward the revolver at his hip. "Get to your mother," he tells Sarah quietly. "Tell her to stay inside." Sheriff Thorne from Copper Creek arrives with 2 deputies, reining in his horse before Hope's porch. There's something cold in the lawman's eyes that puts Hope immediately on alert. "Zachary," Thorne calls. "Been a while." "Sheriff, what brings you out this far?" "Looking for fugitives," Thorne replies. "Scanning the property. Woman and child. Wanted for questioning in connection with a murder back in Colorado territory." Hope's expression remains neutral as Thorne explains that Samuel Rivers, a wealthy mine owner, was found dead with a letter opener in his chest. His wife and daughter disappeared the same night, along with family valuables. When Thorne requests to search the property, Hope refuses, citing the lack of a warrant. The sheriff leaves with a threat to return, and Hope knows their brief peace has been shattered. That night, with Sarah asleep in the cabin, Eleanor sits across from Hope at his kitchen table. By candlelight, she confirms what he's already guessed. She is Samuel Rivers' wife, but she didn't murder him. She speaks of years of abuse, of Samuel's cruelty behind closed doors, and of the night he turned his attention to Sarah. Their struggle ended with him falling against his desk, the letter opener piercing his chest. "Why tell me this?" Hope asks. "You could have kept running." "Because Sarah needs stability," Eleanor answers, "and because you deserve to know what kind of trouble I've brought to your door." Days pass with increasing tension as Hope helps Eleanor prepare for Thorne's inevitable return. In the cool morning hours, he teaches her to shoot his old Colt revolver, her hands steady despite her initial reluctance. Together, they establish escape routes and signals, fortifying the main house against potential threats. Sarah begins to emerge from her shell, following Hope with growing curiosity. One morning, as they feed the chickens together, she asks, "Are you afraid of the bad men too?" Hope considers his answer carefully. "Being afraid isn't the problem, little one. It's what you do with that fear that matters." "Mama's afraid all the time," Sarah confides, "scattering corn for the hens." She pretends she's not, but I can tell. This simple observation gives Hope insight into Eleanor's constant vigilance, a mother trying to project strength while terrified for her child's safety, before he can respond. Hoofbeats approach rapidly from the south trail. Jacob Miller, Hope's nearest neighbor, rides into the yard, his expression grim. Riders coming. Hope, he warns without preamble. 6, maybe 7 men, armed, not looking friendly. Thorn? Hope asks. Already moving toward the house. Jacob nods. And others I don't recognize. Hired guns. By the look of them. I stalled them as long as I could, then cut across the north pasture to warn you. With less than an hour to prepare. Hope leads Eleanor and Sarah to a hidden cave in the western ridge, a place only he knows from his hunting trips. He supplies them with food, water, and a rifle, then returns to face Thorn. The confrontation is tense. Thorn arrives with a search warrant and additional men, hired guns rather than deputies. As they tear through Hope's property, Thorn reveals, Rivers Mining Company has offered $5,000 for information leading to her capture. That's a lot of money to find a grieving widow, Hope observes, watching the men dismantle his home. Finding nothing, Thorn leaves with a threat hanging in the air. After retrieving Eleanor and Sarah from their hiding place, Hope proposes a solution. Remember what I asked you that first day, about working or wearing white? Eleanor understands immediately. Marriage. It's protection, Hope explains. Legal protection. A wife can't be forced to testify against her husband, and I'd have more standing to protect you both. When Eleanor questions his willingness to risk himself for them, Hope reveals a glimpse of his past. 20 years ago, I couldn't protect someone I should have. I won't make that mistake again. 2 days later, Pastor Mitchell performs a simple ceremony at the ranch. Eleanor wears her cleanest dress. Sarah, clutching wildflowers beside her. The words are ancient and binding, though spoken for practical reasons rather than love. What none of them realize is that someone has overheard the arrangement, someone tempted by the $5,000 reward. As the pastor's wagon disappears down the trail, Hope can't shake the feeling that their troubles are far from over. The legal protection of marriage might shield Eleanor from immediate danger, but it has also bound Hope's fate irrevocably to hers. "What now, husband?" Eleanor asks, the words strange on her tongue. "Now we prepare for winter." Hope replies simply, and Hope Thorn loses interest. But hope, as Hope knows too well, is a fragile thing in these harsh lands. 3 days after the wedding, Hope rides out at dawn to check the western fence line, where a fallen tree had damaged the barbed wire. The morning is crisp, with frost silvering the grass and distant clouds promising snow before evening. He's been working for perhaps 2 hours when he hears a horse approaching at speed. Jacob Miller reins in his lathered mount. Face grim. Riders coming. Hope. 6, maybe 7 men, armed, not looking friendly. Hope's blood runs cold. "Thorn?" Jacob nods. "And others I don't recognize. Hired guns, by the look of them. They stopped at my place asking questions about your new wife. I stalled them as long as I could, then cut across the north pasture to warn you." Hope is already mounting his horse. How far? Hour, maybe less. He rides hard for home, finding Eleanor already moving toward the cabin, calling for Sarah. Her instincts have grown sharp in their short time together. "Thorn's coming," Hope explains, dismounting. "With men, we don't have much time." To her credit, Eleanor doesn't waste breath on questions or panic. What do we do? They work quickly, moving furniture against doors and windows, gathering weapons and ammunition. Hope positions Eleanor at the back window with his Winchester, while he takes the front with the shotgun. Sarah they place in the root cellar with blankets, water, and strict instructions not to come out until one of them comes for her. "If anything happens to us," Hope tells Eleanor in a low voice, "there's a trap door in the root cellar that leads to a tunnel. It comes out behind the ridge. Tell Sarah to follow it. Then head north to Jacob Miller's place." Eleanor's eyes widen. "You built an escape tunnel?" "This ain't my first standoff," Hope replies grimly. They fall silent as hoofbeats approach. Thorne calls from outside, demanding they surrender Eleanor. Hope responds through the cracked door, refusing. The standoff escalates when a shot shatters the window frame near Hope's head. The next few minutes dissolve into chaos as bullets tear through the cabin walls. During a brief lull, Hope hears Eleanor cry out. Turning, he sees her clutching her arm, blood seeping between her fingers. "How bad?" he asks, moving to her side. "Just a graze." She grimaces. "I can still shoot." Before he can respond, a crash from the kitchen signals that someone has broken through. Hope swings around as one of Thorne's hired guns bursts in, pistol raised toward Eleanor. Without hesitation, Hope fires, the shotgun blast throwing the man backward. In the sudden silence, Sarah's terrified scream pierces the air from the root cellar. "Get her," Hope tells Eleanor. "Use the tunnel. I'll hold them off." She grips his arm with surprising strength. "Not without you." The front door splinters inward, and Thorne steps through, revolver raised. The tense standoff is interrupted by the sound of approaching horses, many of them. Confusion flickers across Thorne's face as he glances over his shoulder, giving Hope the opening to strike him unconscious with the shotgun butt. Outside, Jacob Miller leads a dozen neighboring ranchers, all armed and determined. "Thought you might need some assistance," Jacob says. "Word got around about Thorne's private hunting party." With the tables turned, Thorne's men are disarmed and restrained. Hope finds Eleanor and Sarah huddled together in the root cellar, holding each other tightly. "It's over," he tells them softly. "For now." The next morning, William Hayes, Samuel Rivers' former business partner, arrives with news that the Rivers family has filed civil suits against Eleanor. "They'll tie you up in court for years," he warns. Hope exchanges glances with Eleanor. "Then we need to get to the truth about Samuel Rivers, about what really happened that night." "How?" Eleanor asks. "By going to the source," Hope replies. "We're heading to Colorado Territory." The journey to Colorado Territory is arduous, with winter's approach making mountain passes treacherous. During the long nights by campfire, Sarah begins to open up, her small face serious in the flickering light. "Are you really my papa now?" she asks Hope one evening, while Eleanor prepares their simple meal. "On paper," he replies honestly, "but I'll protect you like one, if you'll let me." She studies him with those old eyes in a young face. "My real papa hurt Mama." "I know." "Will you hurt her?" "No." Hope promises, meeting her gaze steadily. "Never." This simple exchange seems to satisfy something in Sarah, and she nods once before returning to watch the flames. Silver Creek appears before them on a cold November morning, a proper mining town with wooden sidewalks, a bank, several saloons, and rows of neat houses climbing the hillsides. It's larger than Hope expected, with an air of prosperity that makes their mission seem even more daunting. "Samuel's house is up there," Eleanor says quietly, pointing to a large structure overlooking the town. The one with the white columns. They secure lodging at a small boarding house on the outskirts of town, where they're less likely to be recognized. Hope begins gathering evidence immediately, seeking out witnesses to Samuel's true nature. Maria Vasquez, the former housekeeper, confirms Eleanor's account of abuse and adds horrifying details. "The night he died," she explains, "I heard them fighting. Senior Rivers had been drinking heavily. By the time I reached the study, he was on the floor, blood everywhere." Dr. Phelps reluctantly admits treating Eleanor for suspicious injuries multiple times. Mrs. Rivers' injuries were consistent with repeated abuse, he acknowledges. Broken ribs, fractured wrist, concussion. Each time, Samuel had a convenient explanation. William Hayes reveals that he had confronted Samuel about his behavior toward Sarah shortly before his death. The things he said. Hayes shudders. "I told him I'd go to the authorities if he touched that child. He laughed in my face." On the fourth day, Hope returns to their boarding house to find a crowd gathered outside. Eleanor and Sarah have been taken by men claiming to be law officers. One of them mentioned the Rivers estate, the landlady tells him, with Hayes's reluctant assistance. Hope infiltrates the Rivers mansion through a service entrance. Inside, they discover Eleanor standing before Samuel's father, a document, a forced confession, on the desk between them. Sarah is being held separately as leverage. "Sign the confession, Mrs. Rivers," the old man demands, "or your daughter becomes a ward of the Rivers family." Hope steps forward, rifle raised. Let them go, with Hayes adding the threat of public exposure. The territorial papers might find it interesting. Prominent family covers up heir's depravity. They secure Eleanor and Sarah's release. As they flee the estate, Eleanor's determination hardens. "We need to end this. Hope, once and for all. Tomorrow, we ride for Denver." Hope decides. The territorial governor needs to hear this story directly. Governor Harrison receives them with barely concealed reluctance, his political instincts clearly calculating the cost of involving himself in what he terms a local matter. The Rivers Mining Company employs hundreds of men throughout the territory, he reminds them, puffing on a cigar in his wood-paneled office. "They contribute significantly to our economy and my re-election fund. They're also harboring a family that has committed kidnapping, assault, and attempted coercion," Hope counters, not to mention covering up years of domestic abuse that ended in a justifiable homicide. The evidence they've gathered, medical reports, financial records showing Samuel's instability, and sworn testimonies forces the governor to take action. Though unwilling to dismiss the murder charges outright, he orders a change of venue and assigns a special prosecutor to review the evidence objectively. The trial 3 weeks later becomes the talk of the territory. The Rivers family spares no expense in their prosecution, bringing attorneys from as far as San Francisco. But they cannot silence the parade of witnesses testifying to Samuel's cruelty. The most damning testimony comes from Samuel's personal valet, who describes the final confrontation. Mr. Rivers had Miss Sarah by the arm. Mrs. Rivers was begging him to let the child go. He struck Mrs. Rivers hard enough to knock her down, then began dragging Miss Sarah toward his private chamber. When Eleanor takes the stand, she speaks with quiet dignity about the years of abuse and her desperate attempt to protect her daughter. The jury deliberates for less than 2 hours before returning a verdict of not guilty by reason of self-defense. Their legal victory, however, doesn't end the battle. The Rivers family immediately files civil suits against Eleanor, determined to ruin her if they cannot imprison her. Hope responds by taking their story public. meeting with territorial newspaper editors to expose the full truth of the Rivers family's actions. The story captures public attention across the territory and beyond. Letters of support arrive for Eleanor, many from women who have suffered similar abuses. Investors begin questioning their relationships with Rivers Mining Company, concerned about association with the scandal. 2 weeks after the trial, Governor Harrison summons them to a meeting where they find the elder Rivers waiting. An arrangement has been proposed, the governor announces. Mr. Rivers has agreed to cease all legal actions against Mrs. Zachary. In return, she will make no further public statements regarding her late husband or the Rivers family. Eleanor's only concern is Sarah. Will they relinquish all claims to my daughter? The old man nods stiffly. The child is yours. As they sign the documents, Hope studies the elder Rivers. Defeat has aged him visibly. When their eyes briefly meet, Hope sees not hatred, but exhaustion. Outside the governor's mansion, snow falls gently. Eleanor turns her face upward, letting the flakes settle on her cheeks. It's really over, she whispers. Hope wraps an arm around her shoulders. Sarah pressed between them. It's over. Time to go home. Spring arrives early to Whispering Pines. The snow melts from the ridges by late March, and green shoots appear in the meadows before April is half over, as Hope, Eleanor, and Sarah crest the final ridge on their return journey. The ranch comes into view, buildings standing strong against the backdrop of mountains and pine forest. It looks different, Eleanor observes from the wagon seat, Sarah dozing against her shoulder. How so? Hope asks, guiding the horses down the familiar trail. She smiles slightly. More like home. The ranch has flourished under Jacob Miller's care during their absence, as they settle back into life there. Sarah embraces her new environment with childlike enthusiasm, naming calves, creating stories about the chickens, and claiming the tallest pine tree beside the house as her tree. Eleanor's transformation is more subtle. The watchful tension that characterized her early days gradually eases. She begins to sing while working in the kitchen, folk songs from her childhood. Her laughter comes more readily, her sleep less troubled by nightmares. One evening, as they sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson, Eleanor turns to Hope. "I've been thinking about us," she says quietly. "This arrangement, our marriage." Hope nods, suddenly aware of a tightness in his throat. What about it? It served its purpose, protected us legally, but now you're free, Hope finishes. No need for protection anymore. Eleanor turns to face him fully. That's not what I meant. I meant that we entered this marriage as a matter of necessity, but I find myself wishing it could be more than that. More? Real, she says simply. Not just on paper. Hope takes her hand. It's felt real to me for some time now. Sarah joins them, settling naturally against Eleanor's side. Hope asked me a question once, she announces. He asked if I'd let him protect me like a real papa would. Eleanor's eyes meet Hope's over Sarah's head. And what did you tell him? I said yes, Sarah states matter-of-factly, but I think he needs to ask you a question now. Hope laughs at her directness. Eleanor Rivers Zachary, would you do me the honor of continuing to be my wife, not out of necessity or protection, but because we choose each other? Her smile blooms fully. I would. That summer, they hold a proper wedding ceremony under Sarah's pine tree. Pastor Mitchell officiates, with Jacob Miller as best man and Maria Vasquez, now relocated to Whispering Pines, standing with Eleanor. As night falls and stars appear, Hope reflects on the journey that brought them together. how the worst moments of their lives ultimately guided them toward healing. How family isn't always what you're born into, but what you build with your own hands and heart. The story closes with Hope and Eleanor on the porch after their guests have departed, looking out at the land that now belongs to both of them. Happy? Hope asks. Eleanor nods. Content, she corrects. Which is better? Hope understands. Happiness comes and goes, but contentment is the solid ground beneath your feet. I never thought I'd find this, she continues softly, after everything with Samuel. I believed that part of me was dead, the part that could trust, that could love. But it wasn't dead, Hope says, drawing her close, just waiting. And sometimes, just sometimes, second chances turn out to be better than the first. In the vast wilderness of our own hearts, we often build walls instead of homes, defenses against the very connections that might save us. The journey from survival to belonging rarely follows a straight path. It winds through valleys of desperation, across mountains of fear, until we arrive at that moment of choice, to remain guarded or to risk opening the door to another soul. The truest strength isn't found in standing alone, but in reaching across the divide to offer shelter to someone who has known only storms. Sometimes, the most powerful act of courage is simply extending your hand when everything in your past warns you to keep your distance. Perhaps the deepest wounds can never fully heal, but they can transform, becoming not just scars, but bridges to understanding. In the end, family isn't defined by blood or name, but by those who choose to remain when the easiest path would be to leave. Second chances arrive unannounced, wearing the face of strangers who become essential to our story. And in their eyes, we might find not just redemption, but the home we never knew we were searching for all along. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment sharing what resonated with you most. Don't forget to subscribe for more tales of resilience, redemption, and the unexpected paths to belonging.